Welcome to the Living Aware Parenting podcast. My name's Marion Rose, PhD, and I am so glad to be sharing about aware parenting with you. Aware parenting was created by Aletha Solter, PhD. You can find her work at the Aware Parenting Institute website at www.awareparenting.com. I'm a Level 2 Aware Parenting Instructor and the Regional Coordinator for Australia, New Zealand and Indonesia. I've been an aware parenting instructor since 2005, and I've been practicing aware parenting since my daughter, the first of my two children, was a baby in 2002. In the Living Aware Parenting podcast, I share about Aletha Solter's work in the most distilled and concise way that I can to support parents to understand the philosophy of this groundbreaking approach, the practices and ways to live and embody this life-changing work. I've been fascinated by this work for more than 2 decades, and my understanding of it becomes more and more nuanced over time. I am so willing for this podcast to bring you even more clarity, compassion, and deep care in your own unique journey. Thank you for coming on this voyage of discovery with me. Hello and a big warm welcome to you, and welcome to this second season, which is all about my own experiences with aware parenting, my own journey, so that you really, when you're listening to the episodes, you really have a sense of who I am, my background, and why I am so passionate about Aletha Solter's amazing work. And in this particular episode, I'm going to talk about my journey up until the point where I found out about aware parenting back when my daughter was in utero, when I was pregnant with her, which is 24 years ago now. So I'm going to share about my experiences before that. And in the next episodes, I'm going to be sharing about my own experiences in practicing aware parenting. So I have some notes here that you might see me reading so that I remember the things that I want to share, or this reminds me of the things anyway. So you may have heard me share this many times. I was premature. I was 10 weeks early. I was in an incubator for the first 5 weeks of my life. And that is such a significant part of my story because it really explains so much of the reasons why I am so passionate about aware parenting. I then grew up in England in the late 60s and 1970s. So I was born in 1968. So you can imagine both what my experience was as a baby back in those days. I mean, it was really only recently that people working with babies, hospital systems actually understood that babies had experienced physical pain, let alone all the things that we know in aware parenting, that they experience painful feelings, including in utero, all of the things. So you might have a little bit of a sense of my experience there, being away from my lovely mum, who's actually sitting right here with her headphones on. She is now 94 and I'm 57. So it's been a long journey. So as I say, I grew up in England mostly in the 70s, that standard paradigm of parenting that was around then, separation, punishments, rewards, just the general standard that happened then. I slept in a pram, so I didn't ever co-sleep. And when I was about 2, I had another experience that really replicated those early experiences of separation, which was, and actually I remember many years ago when I was back in England visiting my mum and dad, my dad never moved out here to Australia. My mum moved back out here once I moved. She's originally from Australia. I was talking about crying because I talked a lot about crying and aware parenting, and he said to me, one day, and he'd shared this story before, but he said, one day we just couldn't stop you crying. You're about 2 and we just couldn't stop you. So we put you in the van in the garage. I do want to say that the van was a van that he'd made up into what you might call a camper van, so it had beds in it, and the garage was completely attached to the house. So you just open the door in the kitchen and go out into the garage area, and that was secure. So I was in that secure area. However, he didn't really ever quite understand that that little 2-year-old me was trying to express and heal from my earlier experiences of separation, and how significant this was to, again, have this experience of being on my own overnight, crying and not able to get to be with them. So I'm sending so much love to you if you feel painful feelings when you hear this, and if it's helping you connect with any painful experiences you might have had. Even though I imagine you might be quite a bit younger than me, it's still very common for, right from birth or from early on, babies and small children to experience lots of separation, including at night. So I'm sending love to you if you have painful memories of being separated, being scared, being powerless, all the things that it's so common for little ones to experience. So then I went to mainstream school, and I then had 2 chunks of significant separation from each of my parents. So I came to Australia, where I am now, as you can see, with my mum. Just my mum, and my dad was still back in England, and we were here for 18 months. And back in those days, not only did they not have internet, but actually even a phone call was a pretty massive thing. So it was writing letters to him and a very occasional phone call for 18 months. Then I went back with my mum to England, and then had 18 months just with my dad. My mum came back here to Australia. So again, you can imagine here, from these really significant experiences of separation, which in aware parenting we would call trauma, that very early trauma I experienced, had these repeated experiences that were really similar, of separation. And I'm also highly sensitive. I first learned about that from Aletha Solter, and I will probably share one day the whole story of that, because it was when she came to stay with us many years ago that she first told me about that, and it really changed my life. And I'm actually about to start making my new course on high sensitivity and aware parenting. So if you're in my world, no doubt you'll be hearing about that soon, if not already, because you might be watching this or listening to this after that. So I had the high sensitivity, which meant I was also really affected by things, even more than most children. Highly sensitive children are often affected even more deeply and have even more feelings to express. So I had the high sensitivity and a lot of terror. So I had a lot of terror as a child, and I didn't speak very much. I very rarely spoke. So the whole thing about podcasts and online courses is really just an indication of how much is possible to really do a lot of healing in our life. And not speaking continued into my teens. I always felt different, not a feeling, but I had the sense of being different. I always longed to understand why I was the way I was, and why I seemed to be so different from just about everyone else at school, my friends. And it was really only later on that I realised that so much of that was a combination of being highly sensitive and a lot of trauma, including that huge trauma after birth and those 2 big separations from my parents, as well as the everyday stress and trauma that I was experiencing as a child growing up in that era. Those feelings were squished down until I was 17. They started bubbling up at that point. So I did bubbling up and bubbling up and bubbling up. And I remember, as if it were yesterday, when I was 17, and at that time I'd started drinking alcohol, and drinking quite a lot at times. I'd go out in the evening with my friends, and I remember going to the pub, the English pub, the running horse, and drinking a lot, and then going home. I was staying at a friend's house, and just crying and crying and crying and crying and crying and crying, and not being able to stop. And of course, back then, not having any idea of crying as healing and what was going on for me, I had no idea. I think I was probably quite scared. I think my friends were probably quite scared as well. So clearly, after 17 years of suppressing and dissociating from a lot of very big and painful feelings, my body was getting to the point of, finding it hard to hold those in, particularly in particular situations like what happens when we drink a lot of alcohol. Then when I was 18, I had a panic attack, which again was very clearly about my imminent experience of leaving home. So that separation, that leaving home, the being separated again from my mum and my dad, how I see it would have helped me connect with those early separations again. So again, all that terror was trying to bubble up so the healing could happen. But again, back then I had no idea. I mean, I knew, and some of it absolutely was part of being stressed. I was studying for, interestingly, I'm sitting on a stool and my legs are going a bit numb, and it's really interesting, isn't it? All that numbness, all that dissociation, it was starting to feel those feelings. So what was I saying? I was doing my A-levels at the time. I was studying really hard, so the stress clearly added to those early feelings, and it was clearly so much more than about the stress of exams. So those experiences of separation, of crying, of terror really lit a fire in me to understand myself, as I say, to understand why was I like this? Why was I hardly speaking? Well, my friends seemed to speak freely. Why did I feel so scared so much of the time? Why did I cry that time? And I discovered this thing called psychology. I didn't even know that was a thing. I was here in Australia took a year out after school. Didn't really know what I wanted to do. Well, I did want to be a fashion designer, but my art teacher had marked me very low a lot of the time, so I didn't believe I could do that. So I didn't know what I was going to do. I was going to do business studies just because my friends were doing it. I'm very glad I did not go down that path. When I was at my Auntie Jenny's house in Australia, my lovely Auntie Jenny, who's recently departed this world, I found out about this thing called psychology, and I knew straight away this is what I want to do. This is it. Maybe this will help me understand myself. Maybe this is what I've been looking for. So I dived in deep and did a psychology degree back in England. And by the way, ever since I said today, I'm going to record this series of episodes. For about the past 5 hours, there have been noises. There's been several sets of mowers out the back. There's now the rubbish bin collection. It's been every type of very loud noise. So if you can hear a lot of loud noise in the background, this is my experience generally when I'm recording podcasts. So I absolutely loved learning psychology. I loved a lot of things about it, which I'm going to share. Didn't quite give me what I'd been looking for, but I'm very glad that I did that back then. I also met my first love there, and that relationship was also very significant and transformational for me in terms of a really different experience of connection and intimacy. The psychology degree still wasn't enough for me. There was still this hunger to understand. I'd learned about personality theory, which I'd been fascinated in, dived deep in. I'd learned about cognitive neuroscience. I really remember loving learning about how different, for example, injuries that people had experienced. Like I remember prosopagnosia, where people can no longer recognize the faces, and understanding then about the brain. But I didn't learn really very much about feelings. Some of the topics I loved the most were, actually I'm just going to move my position a bit so I'm a bit more comfortable. I'm leaning forward to the mic. I don't want to do it. I'm going to sit back. And this is how my experience was a bit like this in the first part of my life. Okay. Starting to sit back into, okay. So I loved developmental psychology in my psychology degree. I loved the philosophy of science and psychology. I found that absolutely fascinating, understanding about how we make sense of the world is still one of my big passions. I talk about that in my other podcast, the Marion Rose podcast. And I also love studying what was then called the intergenerational transmission of parenting. Still remember that topic. I think it was probably like a whole term or longer. I remember one of the researchers was called Jay Belsky. This was all about how trauma was passed down from parent to child, and I had a sense of, oh, I'm really interested in this. Tell me more. I want to find out more. So then I kept on exploring, what do I want to do next? And this PhD arrived, this possibility of doing this PhD on the mother-infant relationship at Cambridge University in what was called the Winnicott unit, or the Winnicott Research Unit, actually. So Donald Winnicott was a British psychoanalyst, and he really developed the understanding of babies and the mother-baby relationship. And all the research that was happening there at the Winnicott Research Unit was about postnatal depression and the effect particularly on attachment and many other things. So this PhD was advertised. I don't remember where. I'd love to actually remember where that was, how I found out about it. I found out about it, went to have a look. I remember again going with my mum and standing on the Bridge of Sighs. Got a photo of us when we were looking over the River Cam, thinking, wow, I go to Cambridge University to do a PhD. Bear in mind, I was someone, I didn't share this. Not only was I terrified, but I was so full of self-judgment. Back in those days, I would have said low self-esteem. Nowadays, I don't term it that way. I just had a lot of judgments about myself and my intelligence, my everything. So from this little quiet girl who I was going to say called shy, highly sensitive, believed that she couldn't do what she really wanted to do. Here was me. Could I do this PhD at Cambridge University? Well, it was a clear yes for me. I had a yes to doing that. And at the time, I still really didn't understand how much my own experience as a baby had massively shaped my own life. So that came later. So I trundled off to Cambridge. It was quite a big thing. Again, I actually had symptoms that now in retrospect I would see were related to that separation again, separation from a lovely boyfriend of the time. Studying, so I really dived in deep. With the PhD, it was very self-directed. I dove in deep, and I already had done that in psychology, but here I dove in even deeper, studying Winnicott, studying what was called object relations, which is so strange, isn't it? Which is not about objects, it's about people. Really dive deep into developmental psychology. And it also started therapy at that time. So I'd got into something called the Cambridge Centre, which has nothing to do with the university. It was back in the day, it was called the New Age. It was meditation, things like that. Listening circles. I mean, it was what I'd been really looking for. Remember, one of the first times we got all together in a group and we split off into pairs and we took turns listening to each other. So someone listened to me for, 5 minutes or whatever it was. Again, I still remember that exact moment. I remember where I was sitting. I remember the room. It was one of those pivotal moments of, oh my gosh, this is what I've been looking for. This is what I've been wanting. Didn't have that one single time in my psychology degree. Listening to feelings, sharing, receiving empathy. We didn't talk about that at all. And here's the rubbish bins making a lot of noise. Collecting what is no longer needed. And so one day I was in the Cambridge Centre, and again I'm so grateful. Do you have this? I remember all the pivotal moments in my life where I saw something happened, and I made a decision. So from the paradigm I've created, the Marian method, I have an understanding of what was happening there. I have a podcast all about that. This is not the place. This is the Living Aware Parenting podcast. This is about aware parenting. So I remember one day I was in the Cambridge Centre, and one of my friends, I even remember her name, although we didn't stay in touch. She was sitting at the window, and there were some seats at the window, and she was sharing with someone else there and me about how she'd just come back from her psychotherapy session that she was going to weekly, and she'd realised how the relationship with her father was affecting her relationship with her boyfriend. And I had this, okay, ding, 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 yes. I would like to understand that too. So I started going for weekly psychotherapy, and started off with a Gestalt therapist who I worked with for about 2 years, Pamela. Loved Pamela, still remember so many things about the work there. And I had weekly psychotherapy for 10 years. And actually it's a story for another time, but I do remember saying to the husband of a friend of mine, I also remember exactly where I was when we had that conversation, and I explained that I wanted to have 10 years of therapy before becoming a parent. And he said to me, "Oh, it doesn't sound like you like yourself very much." And I said, I think it's the exact opposite. And it really was. I am so incredibly grateful for that 10 years of therapy. Then there was another moment in 1990. So these are all relevant. These are all relevant to my journey with aware parenting. They really are. So there was then a moment in 1992. I was in Cambridge. I was on Mill Road in Cambridge. It was a lovely little old bookshop. If you've ever been to any little old dusty bookshops where there's a million books all stacked on top of each other, every which way, dusty. To me, it was dusty. Looking, I remember exactly when I looked again, I remember exactly the spine. I've still got the copy of it now. The Continuum Concept by Jean Laidlaw literally sprang off the shelf towards me. That was, again, a pivotal moment. Reading that, and particularly reading about babies being carried 24/7, having 24/7 closeness. Funny I'm using the phrase 24/7 because it's such a what I call disconnected domination culture phrase, isn't it? Although that's a Marian method phrase. I remember crying as I read that book. This was part of the unveiling of all of that grief, which was one of the first layers. There are many feelings I've connected with from my infancy in that incubator. One of the first layers was grief. I cried and 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 I cried. Similar to when I first read one of Michel Odant's books. I think it's called Birth Without Violence, and I think I've still got that copy too, photographs. And also having a sense of, it was all about what babies actually experience, and not only that they feel pain, but they feel pain 10,000 times more. They feel pain even more. We are so exquisitely sensitive. Our skin, when we come out into the world first, oh my gosh. I remember similarly looking at the photographs and reading, pretty sure it's Michel Odant, writing about a baby's experience, and again having a sense of, oh my gosh, it makes so much sense. Oh my gosh. And not that I, at that point, realised, me crying when I was 2, me crying when I was 17, that was potentially those feelings from back then. No wonder I have this sense of just, which I couldn't articulate at the time, huge amounts of feelings sitting in my body. But the pathways of understanding were starting to be made. It was starting to have a sense of my experiences as a baby. And over the years I've had more and more, even until recently I still have more and more clarity about really the depth of what I experienced, and thus deep understanding, compassion for other babies and other children. So still this PhD that I was doing, I was learning. I was also visiting mothers, which was both in hospital and at home. It was very, very helpful for me. I learned a lot about hospital birth, which had a massive effect on the choices that I then went to make. Many, many, many conversations with women about the birth that they just experienced. And then later on I went into the homes and I videoed the mothers and the babies. So various interactions, feeding, playing. And actually I didn't write notes about this, but very, very, very relevant. And you would notice it if you have read my book, The Emotional Life of Babies, which is where I videoed these beautiful mamas and babies. And then I went back to my little room in the Coles in Cambridge, the Winnicott Research Unit, and millisecond by millisecond went through and coded these videos with coding that I had learnt at Oxford University. I had 3 supervisors, one was at Oxford, 2 at Cambridge. So I had a lot of experiences of looking at, with very detail, observing mothers and babies. So again, if we look at that big picture, of course I had no idea at the time, I'm just there doing my PhD, thinking about my experience as a baby and how it really helped me understand babies, helped me understand the mother-infant relationship, as well as all this theory that I'd been learning about. Also was reparative in many ways because I was seeing babies being fed, because this PhD was related to feeding. Not even sure if I've quite really got the depth of that, the reparative experiences. I was observing babies being breastfed and bottle fed as well. But I'd never experienced that. I'd never seen that. I didn't know what that was like. I didn't know what it was. So powerful. Hey, listening. So I was doing all those things, still reading, still doing my PhD. It wasn't enough. I want more. This is still not what I really, really need. I decided I wanted to train as a psychotherapist. So I'm like, okay, I've been doing lots of inner work. I knew I didn't want to be a clinical psychologist because at that time you didn't need to do any inner work to become a clinical psychologist. And I knew I really needed to do a lot. That was in my belief, that was a very accurate understanding of myself. So I wanted to train as a psychotherapist, and I was called to 2 things. And again, I remember the exact point where I really was clear. It's so interesting. I mean, I forget many things. I forget many, many things. But these pivotal moments, I remember them. So I remember sitting in a different room, because we moved around a lot, in the Winnicott Research Unit, upstairs, Fenners, Gresham Road, no, something like that. If you live near Cambridge, I know I've had mentees who live in Cambridge over the years. And thinking, which one would I like to do? So I sent off for prospectuses. I remember reading about the family therapy one in the room in Fenners. The psychosynthesis one, I remember being back in my beautiful room. So it was a shared house in Cambridge for what's it called? Post first degree. Can't remember even the name for that. And it was a very old house and had beautiful stained glass windows in one of the internal doors, and it had a beautiful bay window. Almost every house I've been in always has a bay window. Beautiful bay window, beautiful tree. I was sitting on my bed. I remember the duvet cover, and I read this prospectus from the London Institute of Psychosynthesis. I remember it. I remember the paper. I've actually still got that too. I remember they had quotes all the way through. And the quotes deeply touched me. I felt this deep sense of resonance of, yeah, this is it. So I started training, 4-year training, started that in 1992, and then, so that was till 96, and then I did another 2 more postgraduate years. I met my first husband on that course right at the beginning. We went through the whole 6 years together. And I'm so grateful to Psychosynthesis and to Joan and to Roger, who were the founders of that institute, and to Roberto Saggioli, who developed it. It's outside the realm of aware parenting, but in terms of the healing I did, in terms of the process I went through, it's so relevant to my aware parenting journey. So we dove in deep there, as a little ant, to not only psychodynamic models, so models all about the history of our own personal history, all about, again, babies and children, but also about the history of psychotherapy, for example. Again, I remember, so helpful. If you've done some of my courses, like Love Being a Mother, and I wrote a free PDF earlier on this year about the history of the relationship with feelings. You would have seen some of those understandings, or that insight to want to see things through that lens. That comes from there. Lots of different developmental models: birth, infancy, feelings, expressing feelings, also all the psycho-spiritual elements, which again is outside the realm of aware parenting. A lot about expressing feelings. I expressed a lot of feelings in my therapy and in that group. I remember my dear friends that I made there. Lots of crying, lots of raging. By this time I had a different psychotherapist. I lived in Cambridge. I still lived in Cambridge, yeah. And then I moved and had a different one. Anyway, I remember lots of crying and lots of raging and lots of piecing things together, lots of understanding my own childhood experiences, a lot. And I started working, so after that first year of training, we didn't do any practice. After that first year, I started working with what I called clients back in the day. I call them mentees now. So that was back in 1993. So that is 32 years ago. So it's 32 years that I've been working one-on-one with people. And there were a few main things, or two main things that I remember. And again, I remember having these insights at the time on my little, back in the day where everyone was into futons. Futons were the thing back then. I remember sitting on my futon as a sofa, having people coming for sessions. I remember one thing was people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 20s, still longing to have their feelings heard by their parents. And number 2, people disconnected from themselves and what made their heart sing. So I remember one of the questions we were taught in psychosynthesis, and again, I wouldn't use this phrase now, but back then, what makes your heart sing? And people just not knowing what they loved. I remember those 2 things they really stayed with me. And again, this is relevant to aware parenting. I also really remember another relevant moment, which again, I remember it's like these touch points. I remember sitting in a cafe. By this point, I had then moved. So I'd finished my PhD. I was then doing postdoctoral research. I'll share a bit more about this. And I lived in Totnes in Devon. Hello, and again, I've got mentees who live there or near there. Hello. Or any of you familiar? Beautiful little cafe just up on the right hand side, just below the little bridgey thing. Sitting in that cafe, I don't remember the exact table we were sitting at, and it was my first friend who'd had a baby, and her baby started crying. And I remember just having a thought at that time, babies have feelings, because I've been studying this for many years now. I'd also been doing all my own study. I've been going to all kinds of other workshops. I'd been done rebirthing. I'd done holotropic breathwork. Again, things that are just, I dived in deep to all kinds of things, read all kinds of books. It was my passion. It wasn't just I was studying it, practicing it. I was immersed in that world for the whole of the 90s. And I studied people who had had hypnotherapy and had remembered their birth. So I was like, this baby's crying. We know babies have feelings. I wonder if babies ever need to actually express their feelings. We're doing all this crying. I'm doing all this crying in my therapy. We're doing all this crying in the groups, in the training, the whole of crying. I wonder if crying can ever be healing for a baby. I'm having that just little thought. Of course, not being left alone. No. But just there with her mum, her dear friend, and me. Just a little thought that drifted across my consciousness. So as I said, I'd finished my PhD. I was a postdoctoral research fellow, very grand again, little me from Leatherhead, who believed myself to be not competent and not intelligent, doing this postdoctoral research. And by then I was studying the cognitive capacities of babies. So this time, instead of talking with mothers, I was actually holding babies. So I did a lot of holding babies. So again, on both a professional level, but also on a personal level, all of these things were so relevant to me in my journey, and they helped me understand babies. They helped me understand my experience as a baby, and they also were such a ground for me to then, when I became a mother myself, and I became pregnant, became a mother, that I'd had all these experiences that so many in this culture don't have. So many young women, or any age women who have babies, may have hardly ever held a baby in their life, or perhaps not since maybe if they had siblings many years before. So again, I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for all of these experiences of holding babies. So in this research, we did a few different types of studies. One of them was actually about different kind of gestalt, the different gestalt in terms of completion, whether newborn babies, what concepts they had around gestalt completions. So this was me and my colleague. We had one of us would sit holding the babies, showing them various things, dots and lines and all kinds of things that we'd made ourselves, drawing them. And the other one, and there was a little screen at the back, which we'd also made, where one of us would look through and video the baby's eyes and video what the babies were looking at. And from that, we would then crunch the numbers and work out what babies understand, basically. So again, here's me really, really, really observing babies very closely. And again, learning all the research of the time, how much babies understand, how babies at newborn prefer, if there's a breast pad of their mother's milk and someone else's milk, they will turn towards that. Understanding how much babies know, how much they're learning right from day dot, and of course in utero, what they're learning from language, what they're experiencing. I had already been diving in deep to pre and perinatal psychology from a long time before, so this just continued. So prenatal psychology, so again, really looking at what babies experience in utero. And again, I was doing my own study and research of pioneers such as William Emerson and all kinds of folk who are really looking at babies and consciousness, their feelings, their experiences in utero, during birth and after birth, and how just basically how sentient babies are, how much they experience. And actually, as I'm sharing about this, I'm just so grateful. I mean, you can see as I went into becoming a mother and then to finding where parenting, I had all of this. And this is just like a little snippet of my experience. I came in, oh, there's that little sweetie's back again. If you've been doing my new course, oh my gosh, it's the peewees. So there was a little peewee nest out in the tree out here, and for weeks I watched them. Charles and I, my lovely builder and I, who loves birds as much as I do, we watched them make the nest. It was if you've watched my whole process, emptying the pool, filling the pool, parents came, and then the two babies, Bob and, what do we call them? Bob and Susie. I'm just trying to see whether there's only 3 of them. Oh, hang on. There's another one higher up. 2 parents and 1 baby. Look how long your tail feathers have got, sweetheart. Oh, they come back to say hello. I love that. So last week they both flew, the babies, and they haven't been back since. Well, I haven't seen them, and they come back to say hello. So when it was very, very hot, we had a few really hot days, so I was basically, I was spraying the trees around them every half an hour to just see if I could cool things down a bit for them. Oh, isn't that so beautiful? I think they're coming back to say hello, and that's how I'm perceiving it. I'll be back in a minute. Oh, I feel so happy and so delighted. Oh my gosh, wow. I love animals so much. And I think that's probably part of it, is my deep passion to understand babies, to really, 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 really understand their experience. It's part of why I'm so love animals, because there's so much that's so similar in terms of we may not as humans necessarily. Oh, the parents still feeding their young. Wow. Oh, and then there's another, that's one of the minors come back, who's got some babies. Wow. Still feeding a little one, so we know it's one parent and one youngster. I don't know where the other one's gone. So yeah, I mean, this is, I think, why I dived in so deep, and I think again I forget this sometimes, the amount of years. I think it was 14 years from 19 to 33, which is when I gave birth to Lana. Those 14 years I was completely obsessed with everything to do with psychology, psychotherapy, as I say, pre and perinatal psychology, but also all the, what was called, oh my gosh, she's come to stand on the balustrade. Oh my God. Oh, it is one of the other parents. I wonder if the other baby is so willing for the other little one to be well. I'm so tempted to bring in the Marion method here, but this is aware parenting. So, yeah, but I think that is partly why I think also, as well as being highly sensitive, I think many highly sensitive people are really particularly love animals. I think for me too is really understanding how much babies feel and experience, and they may not speak words to us yet, although I did really get into what was called baby signing back in the day when I had children, when I had babies, that I found really helpful. that they are, so in other words, they are communicating. Babies are communicating, birds are communicating. It's just that in our culture, we're often not taught how to understand them. So really my experience was these opportunities to observe babies, and in particular the experience of watching and videoing the mothers and babies for my PhD, and then watching them millisecond by millisecond, many hours of watching that. And then when I was doing the postdoctoral research, again, holding babies, when I wasn't having experience of holding them, but also being the observer and observing what their eyes were doing and what they were doing and how they were moving and what happened to them and what the mothers had told me about their birth and all of those things. So it was the training that I received in all these things that then, of course, I had no idea where that would all lead to. I am so grateful. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful, because it was just such a deep dive. It's such a deep dive. And I'm often in awe because, I'd done all this and as I say, 10 years of psychotherapy, my whole world had been all of this stuff. And yet, as I will share in, I think it's the next episode, my own experience of aware parenting, it was still a really massive thing to be with and listen to feelings. And that was after all of this. So for anybody who's coming to aware parenting with a baby or child, and you're open to all of these things, which are not only the attachment, the understanding of the needs, and the listening to feelings, I'm in awe, because for me it just made sense because I'd done all this other stuff. But it was still a lot. So, hello, darlings. So then I then became alongside the psychotherapy. So I had my own psychotherapy practice by then, which I loved. And I moved from the research to becoming a university lecturer. So I was then teaching the therapeutic relationship to MA students. So again, it's still part of the learning journey. I was learning all about all kinds of new things there. Still in that field, absolutely. And of course, it was very useful in terms of teaching. I remember being terrified. I remember when I went for the job and I got it. And I remember, again, these pivotal moments, I remember being in my lovely bath, which was dark pink, in England, my little home in Totnes with my first husband, which also had a really big bay window, with blue glass bottles all along, which were, again, if you've lived in England or you live in England, the Neal's Yard, beautiful blue bottles with the candles in them, and crying. I'd got the job and I was absolutely terrified. How was I going to stand up in front of people and tell them stuff? So again, I'd done a lot already by this time. So what was I then? 26, I think. So, really, actually not that much. I've been doing therapy for 4 and a bit years. Actually, in the scheme of things, it wasn't that much, but it was a lot too. And oh my gosh, I was so terrified. And actually, I broke my wrist soon after starting the job. I had so many big feelings come up, so many. And of course, as I understand it now, those were all feelings from the past, bubbling up, not only related to my experience as a baby and a child, but going to school in that era, all the punishments, the shaming, the judging. Yes, that all came up. It was painful. And then, a couple of years later, I was 30 years old. So I had a PhD. So by then I got my PhD, which I had already shared that. I was the youngest person to become certified in psychosynthesis psychotherapy. And I met the father. So I was traveling around the world at 30 and met the father of my children and decided to move to Australia. And 3 years later, I was pregnant. There's a lot of stories there. I'll probably share those more over on my other podcast about the massive healing process I went through. because even after all that I'd done, I was still terrified when I imagined giving birth. And I went through an incredible journey, which I'll probably share as I say on that other one, because I think it's a bit beyond this podcast, that I came to feeling completely confident in my body's deep wisdom to give birth, and in my baby, and in the process. So a bit beyond that, I was pregnant and had done that and got pregnant and doing loads of inner work still to move towards complete trust in my body. And I was searching online, because the internet did exist then, very nascently. I was looking for a parenting paradigm, because I was like, well, I've done all these 14 years. Of course, I'm not going to do all of that other parenting that I see around me. No way. I haven't done all this therapy. I haven't spent all this many years seeing the effects of mainstream parenting on babies and children, on all my clients, on all my friends who've done the training, on myself. There's no way I'm going to be doing any of that stuff. But what shall I do instead? I understood it from a therapeutic perspective, but not from a parenting perspective. So, doing a little searching, I found aware parenting. So I was looking for something that would fit with all of that, the academia, all the personal research, all the psychotherapy I'd experienced, all the psychotherapy I'd offered, all the personal development workshops, all the weekends doing various things, rebirthing, all the things. And it's as if I don't even know how to describe it again in a non-spiritual way. Let's say I came across aware parenting and it was the biggest aha moment. Biggest. There you go. It's like a light bulb went off. There we go. Let's say it like that. It was everything I had been looking for, fitted with all the things, right down to even the continuum concept, attachment theory, psychotherapy, object relations, what's it called again? Pre and perinatal psychology. La 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 la. Every single thing. And it had extra pieces as well. Not only all of those extra. Because although I'd had that thought with my friend about her baby and about babies, maybe babies can express feelings. Maybe they do have feelings to express through crying as babies. But learning that babies not only can do that, but that's their innate wisdom to heal from daily stresses, including ones that we create, and trauma, including ones that we create, including ones that our culture creates, because that was so relevant from the continuum concept, including from birth trauma and experiences in utero, was so powerful for me. What is this possible? I just thought up until then you kind of need to wait until you're at least in your late teens really to do psychotherapy or to start this kind of work. Healing can happen from birth onwards. Are you kidding me? Wow. So really, from that moment on, I have been completely in love with aware parenting. I'm still in love with aware parenting. I have been immersed in it for 24 years. I'm still in love with it just as much, although in a different way, because it's like now I know it, I've lived it, I've seen it, I understand it. Oh my God. So whilst I was pregnant, I read The Aware Baby and Tears and Tantrums. And from that moment, as I say, that was just it. Aware parenting. Now, back in the day, there were no aware parenting instructors in Australia. So me and one other beautiful woman, Susan, we at that time, part of the certification requirements, I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but was to go to a workshop in person with Aletha Solter herself. And so I was part of arranging that. And there were some other requirements. So Susan, she became one, I think, couple of weeks before me, and then I was the second person to become an aware parenting instructor in Australia. And she stopped being an instructor some years ago. But yeah, so there wasn't an instructor in Australia, so it was having sessions with Aletha, which I didn't even really think of in the beginning. Didn't have one for quite a while. And if you've heard me talk on other podcasts, it's one of my, it's not really, I wouldn't say a regret, but if I could go back again and do it differently, I would be going back as soon as I found out about it to be having sessions with her. Because learning from someone else, particularly like the person who developed it or someone who's lived it, speeds up that learning process, and that would have had a huge effect on me and Lana and our relationship had I had sessions with Aletha. So, Aletha, if you're watching this, listening to this, I really wish I'd done that. So, reflecting back, this parallel. I'm sure parallel is just two, isn't it? Multi lines in going the same direction of academic research, psychotherapy, passion for understanding our heritage as humans, the whole anthropology piece, my own journey to understand myself and my experiences and my feelings, my own healing, and all of the other things you've heard. It was such a powerful combination, as I imagine you've really gathered. It gave me such deep roots into aware parenting, such deep roots. It really made sense of everything, made sense of my own experience, my own early separation and trauma, my fear, the crying, the potential for healing. And it did open up a whole trajectory of my own healing, which means I am here now sitting, talking, and I love talking, and I love sharing from that literal terror and not speaking. You have amazing potential for healing. And I always remember Aletha in The Aware Baby by Aletha Solter, PhD, the founder of Aware Parenting. That first chapter, the first actually couple of chapters, but that first chapter that I've read so many times, and really how she talks about this innate drive for healing that not only babies have, and children and teens, but that continues through our life. And that's really my experience, that healing is so possible. So not only from my own experience from that 19-year-old me to now 57, but also my mum who's 94, like the changes that she's made, the changes that happened in our relationship, all of that has been so deeply influenced by aware parenting. So Aletha, officially again for the millionth time, thank you so much. Thank you for your work. Thank you for aware parenting. Thank you for giving me your blessing to be sharing this work in the world, because it is so life-changing, and it really is my absolute calling to be sharing this work alongside my own Marian method work, the reparenting and reculturing. And the interesting thing is, whenever I've gone, oh yeah, I absolutely adore aware parenting, I don't want to do, maybe I'll switch over to do just the Marian method for now. Every time I've been like, things have happened, just clearly invite me to go, yes. And this sharing aware parenting, my calling to share about aware parenting, is so strong and continues to be so strong. So, thank you for being you and listening or watching and being in the space together to invite me to share these things, because as I find all the time, which by the way, I'm just going to invite Buddha. Buddha, come here, sweetie. Buddha. He's scratching his back, which he hurts himself. Buddha. That's it, darling. So, I mean, again, not aware parenting, but I also have not ever used punishments or rewards with my dogs. I don't make them do things. So that's a whole nother. In fact, I think I might do an episode on that on the Marian Rose podcast. But basically, that's another example. I learned all about not needing to ever use punishments and rewards. And so if I'm going to do that, why would I ever do that with the dogs that live with me? No, I've never called them, never. Don't say good boy or bad boy. So I'm not going to say that to my children. I'm also not going to say that to these beings. So, as I imagine many of you found, if you're already into aware parenting, this starts off with for me, it was like, oh, I'm going to practice this thing to help my daughter. And then it became, oh, in order for me to practice this thing to help my daughter, I'm going to be invited to, even though I've already had 10 years of psychotherapy and I've been involved in this psychotherapy and psychology world for 14 years, I am being invited. Hey, Buddha, sweetheart. Hey, Buddha, thank you. I'm being invited to dive more deep than I could ever imagine possible. Well, not actually true. I'd already dove and dived deep to my own inner healing and my own getting free from my conditioning in order to be somewhat proximate to parent in the way that I wanted to with aware parenting. So it becomes a whole way of understanding all humans, as I imagine many of you have found. It's affected every single part of my life. Every new friend I've had over the last 23 years has been into aware parenting. That's how I've met most of the people that I then have gone on to go, oh, I really resonate with you. Let's hang out. I have a whole community around the world. I've done all kinds of things that have made a massive difference in my sense of meaning and vision and purpose. So just a big thank you. And why I love sharing my own story. So thank you, because, yeah, sometimes that's what I was going to say. Speaking and sharing our story to others, sharing our experience of our story to others is how we get more clarity and understanding about ourselves and our journey. So even though I've shared this kind of story many times, I've written about it in my books, to really get it in this way, yeah. Because every time I share it, I'm in a different point in my journey. So I might have shared it 10 years ago, but I'm in a different place in my life now. And so whenever we reflect back, we have different lenses through which to see things. We're standing in a different position. So if you want to, I invite you to connect in with your journey with aware parenting, which this might be the first time you've ever heard about it, or it might be that you're an aware parenting instructor and you've been passionate about it for decades as well. Or wherever you are, I invite you to reflect on when was the first time you heard about it. And if you ever want to message me anywhere, message me on social media or send me an email. I'd love to hear about your journey. When did you first hear about it? Did you resonate straight away? Because I know some people don't at all. Some people, I've heard people throwing the aware baby across the room and then later becoming aware parenting instructors. So, yeah, I invite you to reflect on your journey with aware parenting. And do you have, and again, we're all different, so you might not remember things in that way, or you might have different ways of your memory communicates to you, but do you have memories of pivotal, significant times where things happened that really made a difference in your journey? So I invite you to reflect on that. And thank you for being here. In the next episode, it says here in my notes, I talk about my journey with aware parenting. So in terms of practicing it myself as a mother and also becoming an aware parenting instructor. So thank you so much for watching or listening. And I would love to see you in another episode. Okay, lots of love. Thank you so much for listening to or watching this episode. I'm so willing for you to have found it helpful. If you'd like further resources, here is a summary of the details. You can find the full information in the show notes. I do have another podcast, the Marion Rose podcast, where I talk about all my other interests and offerings. It includes the Marion method work, which consists of reparenting as well as what I call reculturing, which includes reclaiming our yeses and nos, getting free from what I call disconnected domination culture conditioning, such as guilt and coercion, and lots more. As of September 2025, Aletha Solter PhD has 7 published books, which you can find on her website, which is awareparenting.com/books.htm. And as of September 2025, I have 4 solo published books for parents and 2 for children, with more coming soon. You can also find out about those on my website, which is marianrose.net/books. In the show notes, I also share links for my free and paid online courses, one-to-one mentoring and social media. I also give information about becoming an aware parenting instructor in my region and finding other aware parenting instructors to work with. See you in the next episode.